Good evening, friends. It's indeed a great moment for all of us to have assembled yet again for the Indian Institute of Architects Telangana chapter's monthly event. As all of you are aware that our chapter of Indian Institute of Architects has been in the forefront in bringing forward some of the issues which concerns the city and us architects fraternity. Last month we did discuss about some very interesting development which was related to modern buildings, where there was a new rule that has come into picture which talks about how we can avoid excavating unnecessarily and trying to see whether we could provide for podium parking above the ground in order to cater to the high demands for parking across the city. To put it in the perspective, I think it is also in some way we are trying to say that we are trying to protect a natural heritage. I don't know if that does really sound nice, because ultimately Hyderabad is also known for its rocks, very unique formation of rocks, and that is also the natural heritage of Hyderabad city and of this whole Deccan Plateau. And I think in that sense, the new geo can be looked at as probably a positive step. Continuing with this whole discussion, we also were looking at scenarios that what else is happening in our city. Recently, you must have noticed that there were many news reports, just as old as day before yesterday, that the local government has gone ahead in Bansilal Pet and started cleaning the heritage well. That's a very nice news. But the bigger news that we really got in this month was the Ramappa temple near Warangal, which has been included in the World Heritage site. Well, these two appear to be a very positive and happy news for all of us, especially all the citizens of this city and architects who are involved with the heritage and conservation practices. But at the same time, we also hear very regularly about some or the other heritage building under the threat of being demolished, because both by the government as well as private owners, because the new development, new space requirements, and sometimes it's a misconception to say that you remove a heritage building in order to make a new building, and that probably adds to the whole development scene of the city. So definitely amongst many of us architects, it is always a point of debate. It really generates very interesting discussion. And we thought at IIA Telangana chapter that why not we bring forward this topic to the entire fraternity and engage with them and sharing our thoughts with some of the experts in the city. And that's how we thought that we would call this event Heritage at Crossroads, What is the Hyderabad Story? So welcome to this event. I'm very happy and honored to welcome our chairman, Uday Shankar Dhoni sir, who's going to do the opening remarks. And then I would be introducing the keynote speaker from Mumbai, a very renowned conservation architect, Mr. Vikas Dilavari, and the other panelist, that is Mr. Sajad Shahid and Mr. Faiz Khan, and our own Shankar Narayan sir. With this, I would request our chairman, Uday Shankar sir, to do the opening remarks and welcome the audience. Over to you, Uday sir.
Thank you, Srinivas. Like you already mentioned, I think we've our IAA chapter at Telangana chapter of IAA have actually been very actively organized quite a few events online, of course, concerning with the heritage concerns of the state and the city. We had a presentation of Ramappa temple's work that has been done by Suryanarayan also some time back. And while today's discussion, I'm sure it's going to be really very, very engaging kind of a discussion amongst the very well-known personalities of Hyderabad, and as well as the conservation architect Vikas Dilavari. I welcome the panelists, Vikas Dilavari and Sajad Shahid and Faiz Khan sir. I think I would really can't wait for listening to Mr. presentations and the views going to be expressed by the experts. I think let's get on with the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Uday sir. So I would now like to give a brief introduction, as I've done a couple of minutes ago, about the topic. I would definitely like to tell the audience who have just joined that what you see on your screen is the event, which is Heritage at Crossroads, and where we are going to discuss many issues related to heritage, conservation, and heritage. Again, probably if the panelists agree, we could talk about in a bigger sense, not just the built heritage, but also the other cultural heritage and traditions and customs of the city. But primarily, we are going to focus on the built heritage of the city. Are we going in the right direction? What are the kind of threats and issues that we are facing today? And what are the ways we could try and mitigate them and integrate them into a holistic development of the city? At the same time, it is important sometimes to probably understand viewpoints from some of the experts who have been in the city, who have been relentlessly working on some of these issues. And on top of that, we are very lucky to have architect Vikas Dilavri. Let me see if I'm able to move to the next slide. Yes. So Mr. Vikas Dilavri is a practicing conservation architect with almost 3 decades of experience in the field, and he's done his double masters in conservation from School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi, and the University of York. And he has been the head of the Department of Conservation at Kamala Raheja Institute of Architecture in Mumbai. He's been involved in many important projects, including the Chhatrapati Shivaji Terminal, which is the World Heritage Site, which was declared in 2004. So obviously, I mean, coming from a city like Mumbai, it's like, you are actually in the bowl of heritage, just like probably Delhi and many other heritage cities. And because having been there since his beginning of his practice, I'm sure he's been involved thick and thin in some of these very important, decisions which the city has made. And this occasion, we are definitely looking forward to him sharing some of his thoughts, some of his experiences, and how he would like to look at preservation of heritage buildings and precincts in the context of how cities develop. And interestingly, if you see what, I don't know if I'm sure you can all see it on your screen. There's a very interesting picture by one Mr. Sanjay Mahatre, who is from Bombay. You can all check him out on Towering Goals. He's a photographer, and he does all these photographies which are related to only towers. That's very interesting. So because I spoke to Sanjog Matre to seek his permission for these pictures, and he mentions that he would like to meet you in person, and he already follows you, and he is very much interested in the heritage of Mumbai. So I thought I'll make that connection. But this picture is very telling picture for all of us. In the foreground, you see probably the fort area of Mumbai, and in the background, you see these skyscrapers coming up. I think this is the perfect setting for Mr. Vikas to come forward and probably start his presentation. And before he does that, I also thought that I would like to probably give him a little hint of what is kind of concern to us and what has been happening, some of the issues that in terms of buildings that we have been tackling. So just a couple of visuals, and then I would request you to start with your presentation. So we are very happy that we are now, our state, Ramappa Temple, is part of the heritage sites of India. This is that temple which has recently been included. I'm not too sure because if I'm sure you would have visited that, but this is what it is. This is one building which was in news, which is again an erstwhile palace of the Nizams. And this was supposed to be pulled down to make way for a new secretariat building. But luckily it didn't happen because the space is not really sufficient. But these are sometimes, in a regular interval, we get these little shocks, you may call it, or jolts that, okay, that building may go. And then all of us suddenly wake up and want to do something about it. This is another very interesting, this is the modern heritage of Hyderabad. the Ravindra Bharati building. This was supposed to be pulled down and maybe created something like this. This is the new Secretariat building, which is kind of coming up right now. This is what I was talking to you about just 3-4 days ago. The enthusiasts, with the help of the local government, went there and started cleaning up this nice heritage stepwell. So we get these mixed signals, some of the local government at a state level, they are very much doing something about heritage, but at the same time, we come to hear that, okay, some building may go away. And then we would also like to, so this is another very interesting project, which is called the Golden Threshold, which belongs to the Hyderabad Central University. And recently we found out that they have entered into an MOU with Intac, and they are actually have already tendered it out, sanctioned it, and the work is going to start for its restoration. So that gives us another very interesting perspective, that what about privately owned buildings, not just by government, and how do private owners look at it? So it is in this context we wanted to organize this panel discussion and a presentation by from you. So over to you, Vikas. I would stop sharing my screen, and then I would urge Vikas. So welcome formally to Hyderabad, the city of pearls, and Charminar of Golconda, and Qutub Shahi tombs, and many other heritage buildings.
Thank you. Thank you, Srinivas. Just 1 second. Can you see? Sorry, can you see that? Is the screen visible?
Yes, Vikas, it's visible.
Yeah, thank you, Srinivas, and it's a pleasure to share some experiences of Mumbai. Again, as you said, mixed experiences, some very good, some not so good, but nevertheless, that's what life is all about. And since the topic is also something similar, which says it's at the crossroads, so we will talk of this experience of crossroads. You mentioned you're a city of pearls. We are a city of gold. And you can see Mumbai is called the city of gold, and gold is in land. And Mumbai being an island, land is the most precious part of it. So this photograph shows that, the Fort Area precinct, which was one of the most, pristine precincts which we had with no high rises. Suddenly you find a high rise which comes in and which is now completed and painted. But it's a residential building, and on your right you can see the church, which is a grade 1 landmark, which used to be the tallest structure, but its significance has dwindled because of what you see, which is happening. This will be more focused to explain you. You mentioned about the photographer taking all the tower photographs. This one is another very apt one, where you had the original tower, which was dating back from 17th century, and then 18th century, and in between the high rises, which is the stock exchange, and this residential building which we find now. So these are the trends which are disturbing, which alters the city, and this is what I would like to talk about, the urban setting. Now, if you really see Mumbai, the transformation, there were great attempts made in the late 19th century, early 20th century by the formation of City Improvement Trust, various things which happened in the past, the plague, the pandemics and other things which happened in the last century were used to improve the quality of life and the city by the formation of City Improvement Trust. So what we really got by the end of late 19th century and early 20th century were a good urban design or town planning schemes executed. But if you really see now, things have changed from plan to ad hoc. So the very fact that the towers are of different varying heights tells you all. Now, I've always been using this slide in all my seminars, so I'm sorry for the repetition of it, but I find it to be very appropriate, because what you mentioned going up and down, the swings, this is because we hardly have architectural historians, unlike UK, but we do have people who are concerned with our architectural history. Now, these are the people who want no change to happen, which is an ideal thinking, but never happens in reality. And to the other extreme, you have a developer or builder who wants complete change. And for him, conservation is a hindrance. And interestingly, the user or society is completely ignorant about conservation. And they can easily get swayed by what change is required. For the government, what I've realized is that living heritage is not on the agenda. What is on the agenda is primarily development. For an ordinary architect who's just graduated out, he'll be happy to do a redevelopment because it's an project, it's an assignment, but sometimes we are ignorant as what we are doing to the surroundings in vis-a-vis urban design. And to a conservationist, he treats it contextual. And I would say like we are a bridge between the two extremes of a historian and a builder trying to come to a least bad compromise. Now, why the first question is we wouldn't have had this issues of redevelopment and new high rises coming in had we had her act in a clear positions. You all know that in the entire country, we have a Rent Control Act, which was legislated post World War II, 1940s onwards. And that has prevented most of these properties from being maintained or kept well, because when you don't pay the market rent, the landlord is not going to maintain the property. So this is one major ill which really plagues the heritage movement nationwide. And of course, the Model Rent Act has been recommended by the central government, but it depends how many states follow it. They tried it in Maharashtra, but it was opposed with great rigor by all the parties concerned. We have preservation, which is restricted to archaeological monuments and protected site. Restoration is just emerging with different schools of thoughts. And many a times when we see that many of the government projects are beautification projects which are done in disguise of restoration, because we are painting stone, we are doing it fast, we are doing it quick. I'll dwell into that later. Skillful repairs, which is the most important thing for conservation, is missing to a very large extent because everyone prefers to do shortcuts with non-professional advisors. Reconstruction, or rather I would say redevelopment, is what is happening, and many a times people think that if they imitate some elements of the past and put it in a high-rise building, that will help in justifying, and they can manage to get their proposals approved vis-a-vis the heritage committees and things. And we all often use this word adaptive reuse, but Mumbai is one place where properties are overused, misused, or abused. You'll hardly find vacant properties, and if they're vacant, they would be, for some very odd reasons. So we work and we operate in this scenario, and this is important to understand, because if this was corrected, if we had good maintenance, we wouldn't have required buildings being pulled down. Now, when we talk of our Mumbai's at least heritage, we have the archaeological sites which are well protected. You have the religious sites which are also well protected. Unfortunately, our industrial architecture or heritage, we did a listing, but it doesn't have strong legislation to protect it. So most of our mills have been pulled down, and some mills are there, but again, there's nothing much happening in terms of adaptive reuse or things like that. Of course, there are attempts, but these are very singular ones. Something good which has happened is on your left-hand side is the colonial public architecture and the public spaces. The 19th century Victorian and the 20th century Art Deco has got the latest status of World Heritage Site. Fortunately, the colonial buildings are mostly with government and semi-government, and they are well protected. But the residential 20th century Art Deco requires strong legislation, which it doesn't have, although we do have a World Heritage Site status. We do have this kind of domestic architecture as what you see on the center, and apparently this is an old slide, but if I revisit, I might find it's not there at all, because things are changing at a very fast pace. And of course, you do have our waterfront, this whole stretch of Art Deco Marine Drive, which has also got a World Heritage Site status, but it requires stronger protection to protect it, because none of these buildings are graded as grade 1 or 2. They are in grade 3s, which means they can be pulled down, kind of a thing. So we are in that pendulum sway between conservation on one side and redevelopment, which is happening on the other side. Now, to come to what are the urban conservation issues, this is a panoramic view of my city. And this is an interesting statistics. I would like to dwell upon this to a certain extent because this might be relevant to your case also. We are the we are the financial capital of the country, and we are one of the most populous city. We have an area of 430 square kilometers. The density is an old census, but what is important was that Mumbai and Hyderabad both were first, earlier cities. We were just fortunate that our development plan was being implemented, so we could get the legislation done. But I think Hyderabad was, much ahead of us and would have been earlier if your development plan to introduce the legislation part. We had a legislation draft since 1992. In 95, we were fortunate that our development plan approved 633 listed buildings, 15 milestones, and 14 precincts. Interestingly, when the review happened, out of which 145 buildings were delisted, because this is a process where you have to have a public hearing. But what we really got was 14 precincts in its place. So I think that's where it compensated. But a very interesting statistics which emerges is that you had 48 grade 1 buildings and you had 145 grade 2A and 121 grade 2B and 260, which is grade 3. Now, the difference between grade A and B of 2 is that 2 doesn't have any open space for redevelopment or for development, but B has the potential for development. As I said to you, it's not necessary that all the 48 grade 1 buildings had to be grade 1, but most were there. Interestingly, we did a lot of listing. We had a very active MMR Heritage Society, which commissioned many professionals to do study. So we had many more listings and study which was done of many precincts, which was passed on to the heritage committees, and heritage committees recommended it to be implemented. But unfortunately, nothing happened from 95 onwards to 2012, when the government decided to have additional review of listing. So we had 948 buildings coming more. We had 47 precincts which got added. But interestingly, if you see the statistics, the grade 1 declined from 48 to 10. And grade 2A became 165, grade 2B became 208, and most of them slided to grade 3 categories, which is 580. But having said this, there were about 47 precincts. So this was a mixed bag, what happened. And but the only good news was that we got 2 World Heritage sites in that status, in that duration. One is the VT station or the CSMT in 2004, and the Art Deco and the Victorian Ensemble recently 2 years ago. Now we have a review committee who's reviewed the entire list, the new one to be gazetted, and out of which a few have been gazetted and officially been disclosed, whereas rest is still pending. Now, the interesting thing is when the new the development control rules have been made, they allow the grade 3 buildings and precinct buildings to be demolished without the permissions, without, well, you require the permission of MHCC, but frankly speaking, the municipal commissioner has the power to allow the building and the redevelopment to go as tall as 32 meters. So that's been a very sad state of affairs, because grade 3 building forms the bulk, or the precinct forms the bulk of your heritage when you talk of an urban grain. And if that gets washed away, the entire setting of the city changes. Very interestingly, when I was with Kamla Raheja College, we did a rough analysis, and we've come to a conclusion that less than 10% of Mumbai is what is under heritage. And this includes the national park and things like that. But having said this, this 7.5 or 10% commands the most important real estate. So that's where, that's where the potentials, and that's where the threats are. Now, interestingly, Bombay or Mumbai has always been an island. So the land has always been squeezed. And of course, reclamations have happened in past. And what you see on your left-hand side is when the fort walls were demolished, new architecture came in. And this new architecture was for the city, to improve the city, both in terms of function, in terms of imageability. And that architecture of yesterday is today's heritage. And this is what is in the World Heritage Site now. But if you see on your right-hand side, we've lost that sense of giving benefits to the city, and it's more of individual benefits to builders or to individual owners, as a result of which we have a very fractured city, which is what which is difficult to palate. I mentioned this earlier. We have about 16,000 buildings which are cess properties. Now, cess properties are properties which are prior to 1940s, and these are the condition in which most of our heritage stock is. Out of which some are very important heritage buildings also. Now, if you take a view of an aerial view, this is a shot which has been taken few years ago, and you can see the grain being so uniform. And of course, you can see the high rises coming and the shadows will dominate. But the bazaar and the grain was a very integral feature of the social fabric of Mumbai's heritage. And we do have a problem now. Most tenants want redevelopment to happen because that helps them in getting ownership. So they don't mind sacrificing the quality of life. They don't mind being cramped and not enjoying the kind of facilities which they used to enjoy earlier, but they are happy to have an ownership thing. So this is an important factor to keep in mind. And it might be perhaps worthwhile if the government can reintroduce the rental system of housing. That will be an instant affordable housing to everyone, and that can solve many problems. Now, this is the reality which is happening, that the slide which I showed you earlier on your right-hand side, what you see on the top right, is the same slide. If you see now, this is what is coming in its place. And you can already see on the top left, 3 buildings being built. So we are in the area which is Muhammad Ali Road area, which is already a very congested area. And this is what we are building. And I don't know how the densities, how the infrastructure will be able to cope up. This is a matter of thought. Unfortunately, this is being cited as good examples of cluster redevelopment, and most heritage sites are threatened with such kind of cluster redevelopment where the FSI is given as a bonsai, as a bonanza to people to use it. Now, this is a very interesting study which was done by the Guggenheim team which had come to Mumbai. This is a map of Mumbai placed on a table. You can see the island, and what you see interestingly in white is the built stock of Mumbai. And the yellow is what the permissible bylaws would allow the buildings to be. Now just imagine this, and this gives you a scare. And this, as I said to you, this is a photograph of 2012. Now we are 10 years or 9 years down the line. So I really don't know, if most of this is being implemented, and you can feel the consequences of that with constant flooding and other problems which the city has. Now, this yellow would come by replacing this white, what you saw, the white here on your left corner. And this is what constitutes the unloved buildings which have missed being listed in the heritage list. So these are being pulled down. The one on the right-hand side is listed, but apparently, again, that is also subjected to be likely to be pulled down for redevelopment. Now, this is the typical scenario that frozen rents, no money. Earlier, we had a repair board which used to repair properties, but these properties were not repaired well, and often we found that good wood was salvaged and steel was used, which was inferior, and people, the houses started having more problems than having good. So private builders were brought into the picture, and when they were brought into the picture, there was a sale component and there were higher FSIs given. So the idea is that instead of government giving incentives to repair, we are giving incentives to redevelop and to reconstruct, which of course is a great environmental threat. And I'll dwell with that with more examples, which I'm going to show you. This is one of my favorite photographs because this is from Grant Road area, which we had where there were a lot of chawls. You still have a surviving chawl, and what you see on the extreme behind the tall tower, which is one of the tallest tower there, was also a chawl. Now imagine that if a chawl can be pulled down and you can have such a large high rise and a density coming there, and that's what is going to happen with the fate of most of these buildings, how the city would be. And of course, there's a go slow sign. I wish it was go slow for such kind of things rather than the infrastructure. Now, this is again a very interesting site photograph and of a site where there's hardly any, this is meant to be car parking, but there's no proper road where the car can lead. This is in the dense areas of Dongri. I really doubt whether this is being used as a car park, but this is how, we have, all these car parkings which are allowed. And now allowed in the case where even metros are being built, because if you have metros, you should be discouraging cars, but we have not acknowledged that to that extent. Now, I didn't want to sound pessimistic, so these were some realities of this thing, but I would try to demonstrate and talk as how Mumbai's movement has been shaped up with some positive projects. And if this can trigger into a larger government initiative, then something worthwhile can come. The banks were the patrons of conservation, and they always remained because they were housed in historic buildings. But what we've realized now is that these were all located in the fort area of Mumbai. But since the leases were not renewed by the government, most of these banks have moved away to Bandra Kurla complex. So as a result of which, what was meant to be one time the headquarters of companies, now everything has shifted. So it's very unfortunate because many of these buildings now lie vacant or finding new uses. I was fortunate to work on one of the interiors way back in '95. And this is how we could restore the bank to its original glory. And this was one of the first banks to, restore or to really, and it got an Indian Heritage Society award. And this triggered more positive responses from other banks to follow. Then comes multinationals, due to liberalization in 1993. Many MNCs decided themselves to be housed in historic buildings. This is one of those. Jardine Fleming came here in 1994. And this was the building and this was the condition in which it was. This is how we could manage. I was only appointed for the external facade. And of course, there was an architect and interior designer for the whole thing. We restored one wing of it in '95. And you can see how the building got transformed. It apparently was a residential building, but most residential got converted into commercial, and the building with the condition that they'll maintain the building. And that's the incentive which Heritage had given, the heritage laws had given way back in '95, and it was availed. And you can see now more departmental stores have opened up. I was involved with restoring one full wing of it, and you can see the exterior facade being maintained as it is, whereas the interiors are allowed to change. We casted new slabs because the jack arches had lived his life. And this is how the store is doing good business and retaining the architectural heritage. Then started the Indian corporates. And I was fortunate that Tata's got involved. And if you can see the photograph on the left-hand side, all air conditioners putting out, they decided to take this project for 50 years of India's independence. And you can see the flag on the balcony there. And interestingly, the rent control was dominating this building also. It was a tenanted building. So Indian Airlines, who were located on the ground floor, if you can see on the left-hand side, had to vacate, and you had 16,000 square feet, which was made available. And this 16,000 square feet was converted into West Side Store, which is a brand of Tata's only. And you can find that the old use, which was an Army Navy store, it was a store, and it again became a store. So without doing much structural alteration and without investing much except for redoing the interiors, they could breathe a new life to this building. And I was fortunate that I was given a free hand to restore the exteriors, common areas. And we created a new art gallery, which is located here for amateurs, because This was located in an art district. And you can see the money being plowed back to the building. And after every 3 to 4 years, they keep maintaining the building. So it's an important factor that if you earn the money and if you plow it back to the building, this is how it can be a self-sustainable example. Then a very interesting thing is that semi-government institutions like corporations started getting involved in conservation. And it was unfortunate episode of a fire which happened in the corporation hall way back in 2000 January, and most was burned down. And this is where Intact Mumbai chapter was asked to come into picture. And this is the first time we could really use the conservation techniques, replacing stone with stone. You can see a person carving out stone, and on the right is the same stone recarved, matching the original one. And of course, we were fortunate to be given a free hand to restore it. So we tried a various permutation and combinations. And if you can see, this was the corporation hall before. It had gray laminates. It had a carpet floor below. It was all painted white. But when we restored it, you could see the wooden furniture. You could see the Minton tiles. You can see the chandelier, and you can see the original gold gilding, which was something which was missing, which unfortunately the fire had damaged it. So we had to redo it. So the corporators, when they saw this hall, and they couldn't believe their eyes because it became such a magnificent hall way back in 2001 to see. And this gave a confidence that conservation can work, because the next project which I'm going to refer is of Mauda Jillard Museum, which is a museum owned by the municipal corporation. So this is how it triggered off to this next project, which was done by Mrs. Tasneem Mehta, who was spearheading this project. It is Intact Mumbai project, and one of the most successful examples. Now here, public-private partnership comes in. So I'm talking to you, talking in a chronological order as how things keep moving. And in here, you have a public-private partnership where Jamnalal Bajaj Foundation gives money, and there's a tripartite agreement between Intact Mumbai chapter and the MCGM. So this is how the museum was before, and you can see vegetation growth on the top right corners. You can see steel supports. You can see a ticketing counter and broken windows. And we were fortunate to manage to restore it in its original pristine glory. Apparently, this building got a UNESCO Award of Excellence. And this is just to show you the comparison of before and after. So you can see, how we can transform the building. And this is the right procedures, where you do authentic restoration, referring old archival images and not conjecturing things, up to imaginations. Apparently, it had major structural problems, which were also addressed. And you can see the insensitive way how the wirings used to run. All this was streamlined. And it was made, into a wonderful building. Actually, the building is so wonderful that you have to spend your time between the building and the objects, equally. We followed all the norms of conservation of using like-to-like material. This is all talking about way back in 2003, good about 15, 20 years ago, where lime plaster was used. Where we removed all the vegetation growths, we removed all the old accretions and reconstructed most areas. We relied on paint scrape samples and then decided the color scheme based on the original color scheme, nothing that what I liked or what was this thing. This is how the original building revealed its color scheme. We reintroduced a lot of lost arts, especially the lost art of gilding, the lost art of stencil painting, the decorative carpentry work, lime plaster. So you can see the difference which the whole project brought. And this is the facade restored and completed. The footfall has increased. The museum has been the really now a hot tourist spot. It's a cultural activity spot, and it has transformed the entire neighborhood. So these are some successful examples as how transformations can happen. There are various shows which are, there are exhibition which keeps on going and which brings in an enthusiasm, new life to the entire structure. Now, this led to another project because we did it in 2003. The museum was opened in 2008. And then after 4 years, the museum needed more space and needed more area to really do a lot of functions. So we targeted some areas which were completely run down, which were things like this outhouse, a generator room and a gymnasium. And we converted it into a multipurpose hall, a museum shop, and a special gallery for projects or visiting exhibitions, with a large open space where a lot of cultural events started happening. So this is where it magically transformed the entire space. And hats off to Mrs. Tasneem Mehta, who coordinated all these efforts. Now, what is interesting is why I wanted to dwell on rent control, because this is an example of a dharamsala which came in 1905. And the dharamsala was made with the simple, logic of that the shops below will subsidize the rent of the dharamsala above. But unfortunately, once the rent control happened, these shops, the dharamsala could not be maintained and kept as per the standards which it desired. I was fortunate. This is an example of a private initiative, and I was asked to work on it. So when we started, scrubbing the paint and other things, we discovered some stencils. So we discovered and we restored the stencils back. I was fortunate that the clients could afford and managed to do it. And just see the transformation which it has brought. The same space which was completely let down, we have air conditioned it. We have upgraded the services. We have upgraded the services, and you'll be surprised that most of the advertisements and the filmy shoots happen in this area. It is now used and it's generating rent and is looking after itself, and also subsidizing the dharamsala part of it in the absence of rent control not being removed. So this is the external veranda and the courtyard. And it's a very successful example of self-sustaining conservation. This building is interesting. This is owned by the Tatas. There was a fire which happened and had destroyed the top right portion, which you can see. It was a very tight site with no open spaces, so we had to restore it back to its original glory. And we managed to do it. And Mr. Ratan Tata has his office located on this top floor once he moved away from Bombay House. So again, it's an interesting example when people can endorse conservation. Yes, it had some very areas of the choke, and the toilets were in a very filthy condition. And it took us about good 2 years to restore all this back. And you can see this. So it's not that it's impossible or difficult. All it requires is an extra effort and the will to do it. And if you have a patron or if you have someone behind, I think conservation can work and will work. Now, having said this, since we were on the Tatas, this is another palatial building which was owned by which was the residence of Jamshedji Tata. But it is now not with the Tatas, it is with R.D. Setna Scholarship Trust. And this is what a rent control can do to that same palatial building as what you saw. If you see this building is the same building. But with meager rents, things don't work. I was fortunate that the ground floor of this building got vacated because there's a Supreme Court ruling which says that any offices having more than 1 crore turnover, the market rents have to be charged. So you have a new lessee which has come in his place, an advertising office which is paying now the market rent. So the money started being plowed back to the building. We took 10 years to restore this building because we were doing it slowly and steadily. And we've just did it in 2.5 crores, restore this building back to its original grandeur. And now it's commanding actually very good market rent. And very interestingly, in every 2 years, we are looking after it and maintaining it. So this is how conservation can really be a game changer. And this is the same interiors now. These are wonderful spaces which the building has. And imagine the exteriors which you saw, how it is. Now here it's an important point. Some of these projects which I showed you were private. Now we come to trust, and especially trust which owns residential fabrics. Like these buildings are nothing very significant and they can easily be demolished as what is the trend and as what the law permits you. But if you look after them well and if you don't do it, I'll show you the example also. On the top right corner is what you see is the present condition. And what your laws allow you is on the bottom left. So the choice is yours, whether do you want to conserve them or do you want to live in a sitting like on the bottom layer, on the left corner. Now the same buildings when repaired, this is how they become. This is another example by the same trust who owns 40 buildings, and I've been fortunate to have worked on at least a dozen buildings, and 3 of them have won UNESCO Asia Pacific Awards. These are the buildings and they all look crumbled and they'll all look coming down, but with little efforts, with the concentrated efforts of shifting the people out, repairing the building, you can come back to the original state. The first thing is to make the buildings watertight. So we have done all these works in phases. Once the buildings were made watertight, you address the structural issues of the individual buildings, casting new slabs, and of course using as much of the old which could be used, and what had lived its life, like the jack arches, we replaced, and provided modern amenities like toilets and other things which are required for such things. And of course, we've used cement here. It's not a question of using lime because these are, tenanted properties with hardly any rents. But we've done minimum intervention and tried to retain the maximum of original. Now, with the result of which we've again revived the lost arts. The box grills, which are a problem, were removed, and people could appreciate, these decorations which were done. And the same buildings have got transformed, and you can see the transformation which these buildings can bring. So these are the same buildings which look ugly, which look run down, which should be pulled down. But if you conserve them, they give you a new lease of life. It is no load on the infrastructure. The community harmony as how people inherited, because most people who were born here are the ones who are now, are living here, who are about 70 plus and other things, and they have a bonding with this place. So this is how, conservation can really work very effectively. And as I said to you, I was fortunate. I was given a free hand to do whatever repairs you wanted to do for these buildings. Very interestingly, the cost is not much. If you really talk of conservation cost, if you've done the complete structural repair, it works out to 863 rupees, which was in 2011. Of course, the rates would have gone up now. But if you did just the exteriors, it is as low as 200 rupees. And if you did moderate interiors and complete exteriors, it's about 450 at that time. So at very little cost, you could do so much. Now, I don't understand why this is not being encouraged by the government and why they encourage redevelopment, which costs you 4,000, 5,000 rupees a square feet. Now, this is another very interesting example that someone had purchased the property, had vacated the tenants, and now wanted to rent it out. And he thought he'll approach a conservation architect, and which will help him in enhancing the market value. And you can see the transformation. This is the building. This is the building which he purchased. This is how the roof and the other condition was. This is how we proposed the alterations, and this is how the building got restored. And interestingly, now the market, the building commands a good market rent, and it has helped in gentrifying the other surrounding buildings. So one example can be good enough to help the others to get motivated. So this is one successful example of self-sustaining efforts of conservation where no government incentives are given, but yet we managed to do it. Of course, now I come to state government interventions where the municipal corporation is involved, the Flora Fountain. And it is not just the restoration of the fountain, but of a public square, a square which the city always wanted to have it And these are chronological photographs where, you had a trough, you had a water body, but apparently when the trams came in, the circle got reduced to a smaller circle. Then the trams disappeared. So you had car park, and you had car park practically touching the circle, the inner trough. And then this is how the condition of the water engineering was. It was all worked out with taps and with the jet which used to flow. The water engineering was completely at its not in its proper condition. We had broken hands. We had images which were been repaired earlier, and if you can see from the photographs, the water was coming out from anywhere and everywhere. And this was since these were repaired, the hand which was broken was repaired with cement. Someone decided to paint it, so annually it had paint every year. So this is just the photograph, and this is what we attempted to do, was to improve its water engineering, understand the water engineering first, and then improve upon it. And this is a completely MCGM project, and we followed all the so-called international system, cordoning it off. We are located right in the heart of the city. Conservators from Delhi Intact came in to restore this with the help of steam, which was chosen to to remove the paint. It took 2 years to remove the whole thing. And you can see the difference as how professionally things work. And the same fountain with this water engineering restored, the original cast iron railing and brass railings reintroduced, has really transformed this, because there was no point only conserving the monument, but also its setting. This is just to show the inauguration of the fountain happened first. And while we were working on this, we found the old trams, the tram line. So we decided to retain it, and it has become an interesting feature because everyone who goes there sees this tram lines. And now it's become a very active plaza. Earlier, it was just used as a place to walk and cross across, but now it is an assembly place. Conducted walks happen from here. People use it in the night, they sit and they use. So this is where, the city has to take its efforts to restore these kind of spaces back, which will give good examples and set good examples. I think this is the second last project, again, a private project just recently completed, where the municipal corporation had given a notice of being an unsafe building and it had to be either repaired or demolished. We decided to repair the whole building. It took us 2 years, and of course, because of pandemic, we had to slow down. The paint was removed, the structural cracks were all addressed. This is the rear facade, which was then transformed this way. You can see the facade, and jack arches were used. So all the jack arches were restored using jack arches only. The common toilets were completely refurbished. And what is interesting is that the client would have spent about 4 to 5 crores, but he had the office space. He had moved his office from here, but he now gets back this space. Plus he gets back an additional space which he can lease out, which you can see on the bottom right. So it, without in, he's invested the money and has benefited and gained because the market value has improved. So this is another very successful example. And of course, when we do the buildings, we have to upgrade the lift, we have to upgrade the electricals, provide suitable places for air conditioning and toilets. So all that has been done, and that has upgraded the market value of the property. Last I would come is religious institutions. This is a dargah, which is 1908. A very interesting location where it is located on a very high outcrop just opposite Haji Ali, and a very unique dome which was built of brick. And apparently its condition was that, it had breaking, loose falling plaster, details were missing, the China mosaic required to be redone. Of course, the China mosaic was done in 1960s. And this is how the internal condition was. It's located close to the sea, but the glasses were broken. The seawater, rainwater used to come in, and you could see the squinches and other things. This was the porch, which was in structurally unstable condition. And this is how we could manage to restore it to its original, remove the paint, put the new leaded glass inside, and restore it to its original pristine glory. And interestingly, apart from being a very sacred and a pious religious place, it has now started attracting many people to come and visit to it, just to see the to enjoy the tranquility of this place. So these are some successful examples which can leave this thing. Now, I just basically want to initiate this as a discussion, and this is what my viewpoint is. If that can today's architecture be tomorrow's heritage, and if it can't, it is one of the good reasons why conservation should be encouraged and we should not pull down the old things. Second thing is that urban renewal and regeneration should be given a chance rather than only going by the redevelopment way. When I mention urban renewal, it is a mixed bag of both redevelopment, repairs, reconstruction, adaptive reuse, and things like that. But we don't try this out. We always have two extremes, either conservation or redevelopment, but there's no in between. Second, that even if redevelopment is allowed, scale, density, and land use should be controlled to match with the character of the place. Otherwise, the purpose gets defeated. So if we follow this, and there should be stricter norms for grade 1, grade 2, and then the precincts. But having said this, we also should acknowledge that change is an inevitable part of nature. Change for the need should be permissible, but not for the greed. And what I've realized is that if we can give very quick permissions, then you'll have many people coming and taking permissions and doing conservation. The very fact that if permissions, we have a very effective heritage committee which gives very quick permissions, but the rest of the permissions from the municipal corporation, which is an online system, can take a year or more than that. And that's where things become difficult. And the last thing is that we need to do a least bad compromise rather than do the best possible solution, which is the practical way forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vikas. I think it was quite a thought-provoking presentation, I must say. Obviously, with your kind of experience, what you have shown us are remarkable examples of restoration. And pertinently, you have raised some of these very important issues, and which, of course, I would be discussing along with the other panelists soon with you. Of course, the first thing that comes to our mind is that who takes the decision, or who basically decides what the city should be like. I think that has become one of the very key, point of discussion or meeting point between the government agencies, private owners, and the citizens. So we'll come back to all these issues. Thank you again on behalf of Indian Institute of Architects, Telangana chapter, for such a fantastic presentation. I'm sure there are many in the audience who have jillions of questions, and they would like to interact with you. So very quickly, we would like to move on to the panel discussion, which could talk about all these issues which you have raised, and then some of the issues which our own city has, to which I'm going to invite my fellow panelists who would probably throw some light on that. With that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go a little back again to, so how do I close this chat? Close, okay. Can you all see my slides, please? Is the presentation clear? Yeah. So as I had mentioned in the beginning that there are some good and bad, so I just thought I will continue with this little showcasing of what our city is going through and what are the challenges that we have been facing in the recent past. I'm not really going into and what all things can be done and required to be done is something which we would be discussing. This is what I got these images just now. What is happening at that famous Bansilal Heritage stepwell? Good or bad, we can decide later. But this is action. What's happening in the city right now? This is another very interesting palace, the Mehboob Mansion in Malakpet area, which could not be restored. It is in a very dilapidated condition, and This is another very interesting. This is another kind of an infrastructure which Vikas was also mentioning. It's not just about a couple of buildings, but this is the Gaulegoda APSRTC, then APSRTC, bus depot, which was considered to be a unique structural system that was adopted, which kind of came down or demolished. I'm not aware, but was something which we failed. Qutub Shahi Heritage Park, which has been, under an agreement with the state government and the Aga Khan Trust, but constantly there are many people, I would call them many vested interest of people they have been going against the government and the Aga Khan Trust, filing cases and discouraging them to go ahead with the complete restoration. So can we talk about it? Can we do something about it? What's the real truth behind these kind of, issues which discourages people to restore? The topic which is really the hot burning issue right now the city is facing is this beautiful Usmania General Hospital, which is slated to be demolished because it is not in a good condition. And as Vikas was mentioning, that why don't we invest little to maintain it well, so that we don't have to invest huge amounts of money to make a new one? That I'm sure I would request my panelists to throw some light on. Another very interesting thing, this city has many nice Art Deco buildings, which some of us are documenting. So what about now a movement, before it is too late, to try and look at these Art Deco buildings, document them and restore them and protect them? And of course, as we talked about, that it is the holistic scenario. So with this little context that I wanted to build up, I would now like to invite my panelists of the day, starting with our very dear friend and a long-time heritage activist, Mr. Sajjad. He's been with Intact for many years, and as Vikas had mentioned in the beginning of his presentation, that they had worked together in documenting some of the heritage towns and cities across the state. And he's been also one of the few experts, I would say, in that sense, that who's been with Aga Khan Trust, advising them about the restoration project. And of course, anything to do about heritage in this city, you cannot do without Sajjad sir's, suggestion, advice, viewpoint. So welcome, Sajjad sir. Can I see you on the screen somewhere? If you can switch on your camera.
Yeah, I've done that.
Okay, so welcome again. Then next is another very dear friend, and I would call him like soldier of, in his own capacity, who is trying to pull on and save heritage buildings. And he works with many cultural organizations in the city. He represents the erstwhile rulers' family and their properties. So that is Mr. Fayaz Khan for us. Welcome, Mr. Fayaz. It's so nice to have you amongst us.
It's a pleasure.
Yes. So we architects always feel that we should have, viewpoints from both sides, what the conservation architects, the history lovers, the, heritage enthusiasts always feel that we should be preserving everything. And there are, on the other side, people who own these heritage properties. So we always want to know what they think about this. What challenges do they face in protecting them and preserving them? So I would definitely be looking forward to your viewpoints on that. And last but not the least, our dear friend Shankar Narayan, who has been from the architect side on the forefront in bringing forward these issues. He's very vocal about his concern. He writes regularly about them in the newspaper, and he stands out as one, man army, which is trying to take forward the cause of, not only just heritage. I have noticed Shankar is also about the good way of living in the city. Why should we not talk about open spaces, public spaces? Why should we not protect them? So Shankar, thank you again for joining us. And Vikas, welcome back to the panel discussion. So between four of you, I hope we have some fireworks at the same time, some real sensible advice and suggestions to all our audience here. So first thing, as I was mentioning to Vikas, that typically in this whole discussion, pardon me for my maybe little immature understanding, but I'm just trying to make my points to generate a point of debate amongst four of you. Sometimes it looks like that there is a set of people who are either architects or heritage enthusiasts or conservation people, historians, who want to preserve the city as it is. And then on the other side, there are so-called the larger section of the society, reasons could be anything, whether it is unawareness, whether it is ignorance, whether it is greed, commercial attitude, or whatever you call it. They don't want to do it, or they don't understand the value of preserving it. So where do we find the balance? Or to put it in a different way, that who decides what the city should be like? So this is the first question I would like to pose to all four of you, and I would like to start with Sajjad sir.
जी सीमा साहब, आप खामखा मुझे मुश्किल में डालते हैं हमेशा, क्योंकि मेरा हाल हुआ है कि मैं जो बोला कहा कि ये आवाज उसी खाना खराब की सी है. I've been, harping on heritage for a long time. मैं नहीं समझता कि majority of Hyderabad people have paid any heed to me. So I don't know whether things are going to be any different now. But the point is, whose heritage and who takes decision regarding the heritage? Now, the point is that it's I think, an established fact in Hyderabad that the people of Hyderabad have had very little to say about their heritage and how it should be protected and how what should be protected. They've hardly ever been involved in the processes. So that is a problem that we have been facing since a long time. Fortunately, a lot of people have started talking about heritage, and this is 30 years after the whole exercise of bringing awareness has been in place. For 30 years, we tried to explain to people the importance of retaining their cultural markers, their identity markers. It should not have been difficult in Hyderabad. Unlike other places where when you tell someone an address, like, आप कहाँ रहते हैं, तो मैं राम मंजिल के पास रहता हूँ. The main shopping center is on Jawaharlal Nehru Road, but I've never heard any call Abbott's as Jawaharlal Nehru Road. It's always referred to after a building that people related with. The Abbott's shop, the shop is long gone, but it's still Abbott. And agar Hyderabadiyon ko puche to Abbott shop, Abbott ki shop. That is what you still hear, and that is how we have been doing it. No one knows a street. It's always landmarks by which you let people know where anything is located. With such deep linkages to the built heritage, I have always wondered as to how we could be callous about these identity markers, which are very important. Well, things have been going downhill for quite some time, but in recent times, that rate has accelerated. And now we are not sure what's going to happen. The latest is a couple of days back, from what I hear from my associates in the project, Aga Khan team is seriously thinking of pulling out of Hyderabad. They've had enough, 42 cases, fighting. They spend more energy on fighting cases than on the restorations. That is tragic. And it's not just Qutub Shahi tombs that were getting the benefit of the presence of the Aga Khan team. They were also working on various other places like the Paiga tombs, like the Bashai Ashur Khana, and many other places. So we don't conserve our own buildings. We don't let others conserve our buildings. So I don't know what we want. Abhi, you shared the photographs of an inspection done yesterday by my convener, Anuradha Reddy. The lovely images you shared at the beginning where there's a mass movement, people are involved in cleaning up a well. That is how it should have happened. But what we found yesterday, what Anu documented and the photographs that were shared, is a caterpillar truck, JCB, making a ramp and going down into the well, and in the process, damaging one side of the heritage well. So that is what is happening, because the people who are claiming to be, restoring our heritage are not following the basic, the very basic steps that are required to conserve. They do not consult. There's no concept of archival, documentation or research. They just go ahead and start working, and people who are involved are neither qualified nor do have any idea of what heritage is. At least people like Vikas and many others in Mumbai and various other places, conservation architects, qualified conservation architects with experience are given the task of restoring buildings. Now, if there is a mistake there, that is a genuine mistake if in certain cases you feel that a job is not done properly, then that can happen with any project. But when you know that the people are not qualified or given this task of restoring, then it becomes difficult. Now we just see the first and second, the images. The top images when there is people's participation, and that I think was a show put on by the enthusiastic municipal department. And the little said about their activities is the better, because when we saw a year ago the restoration of Mozamjai market, the day after the inauguration, people who went there saw that it was raining more inside the building than outside. So this is the type of conservation we are having. So there should be some, and the only people who can really make a difference are the people, those who are stakeholders, real stakeholders. सिंहा साहब आपने वेस्टेड इंटरेस्ट की बात की. वेस्टेड इंटरेस्ट मेरा भी है. It vests in my desire to have my city's heritage and culture preserved. So I think we start showing our interest in our city and taking things head on. अगर आप खामोश रहेंगे तो we might have saved temporarily that to Ira Manzil. But I'm sure some method will be found to demolish structures like the Osmania Hospital and various others, some of them have already gone. So we have to really, the public, the people of Hyderabad, those who are the real stakeholders, they need to get into that.
Thank you, Sajjad bhai. Now I would request Fayaz sir to continue the thread on whose heritage it is with your opening remarks.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to, Vikas Saab, hats off to your good work in Mumbai. Very well done.
Thank you.
And thank you all for having invited me for the session. As Sajjad Saab rightly mentioned, it's we the citizens who actually need to do a lot of work. It has to be our input. I've been working on this for past 30 years since I was in my early 20s. I was about 21 when I started off. I was at the Paiga tombs wherein I saw certain things happening, which was terrible. There were encroachments all around, and that's where I started off. And me being a part of the Paiga family, and we residing in places which were old and, that beautiful quality that we were used to. Well, of course, with changing times, things were different. Well, got a little different. But again, the thing is, what I feel with my little experience that I have in conservation of certain properties, some very important properties, some which are supposed to be among the top 3, 4, 5 properties in the city today, that it's not very difficult. I tell you, I've been, in fact, the chairman of an institution which restored a property which was as old as our High Court, Usmania Hospital and others. In fact, the architect was precisely the same. It just took us about a year to do that. And today I tell you that it's going to be there for next 100 years without any problem, provided we maintain it well. It's not just that you're over and done with it. And one point I'd like to make is that when you go in for this kind of restoration, it's not just the work order released to a person to go ahead and do the work. It has to be a dedicated team of people where, for people like us, it really pains when you see that line which is not straight. People call you crazy, but that is how it is meant to be. But today, the worksmen, the people who are doing the job at the site are not aware of this. So we lack that quality, and we have to have that special attention for that. That's number one. Number two, the thing is, social media today plays a major role, so people are pretty careful demolishing properties and all that because there's a movement that starts off and all that. So I guess that pressure is very positive. But again, talking about today's building, we also spoke about today's building. Can it be a heritage of tomorrow? In fact, just yesterday, I was passing through Abbots and other places wherein I saw this huge skyscrapers that were built about 40 years back. And those were the first few skyscrapers in Hyderabad. But I was kind of wondering, this is ready to be demolished right now. I mean, they are in a state wherein they are not going to be comfortable people to live in for after about, say, 10, 12 years or so. So the thing is, we aren't actually working on quality construction when it comes to today's structures. Like you visit any part of Europe, you'll see about 100-year-old multi-story building, which is quality even today in the United States, in Malaysia, and other places, parts of the world, which it's going to be fine for next 80, 90 years. A newly built building, it's going to be quality and it's going to be heritage after 100 years. But I don't see that happening in our country. So that is especially Hyderabad. I feel I can't comment on other places. Well, of course, I feel similar. It's very much the same. Apart from that, I had certain experiences with the heritage committees of certain places, like, way back, Sajjad Saab is aware of that. And the reason I'm putting this across is, we all have to be sensitive and positive minded. We had approached the then Heritage Committee for a sanction representing a very, very prestigious organization of Hyderabad. And we were spending every penny to do up this property very well. We were ready for it. We were ready. We're open for any kind of idea or suggestions. So therefore, when we went in for the permissions out there, we had this panel sitting right across us, and it was ridiculous. We were embarrassed to be a part of that. It was being pointed out. It was being, the way the discussion was moving was something like they were talking to some not suitable people. What the hell? So it was very negative. Sajjad Saab was aware of it, and I was told that gentleman was off the panel after that. And we were representing the most dignified and most appropriate organization to do some good work. And apart from that, what we are taking up, the reason I'm saying this is, there are certain properties which aren't standing anymore. They have been demolished way back, or they've fallen apart. What we are doing presently, some of our organizations, we are sourcing, we are trying to get plans and pictures of those properties which aren't there anymore. We are rebuilding those properties precisely the same way it was 100 years ago. So that is something we are initiating right now. So I think that is what is required, and we can easily do it. Pulling down a structure is very, very, very simple. It's the easiest thing to do. But I tell you, it is pretty easy to restore it as well. I've been doing that for 25 years, and I enjoy doing it. And I tell you, once you do that, that property, those walls, beautiful walls, lime structures, they are ready to go for the next 100 years without any problem. So with that, I'd like to end and we'll discuss later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Faiz. So I would come back to you with this question, that why do you want to rebuild what is already gone? But we'll keep it for the later part of the discussion. Now, Shankar, I know you've been waiting to put your points forward. So your opening remarks about whose heritage it is ultimately.
Yeah, thanks, Srinivas. And very inspiring presentation by Vikas in a very challenging urban scenario. Mumbai is something which hats off to the city in all its respect. And though Hyderabad is somewhat different from Mumbai, the challenges are similar in every urban scenario. So whose heritage it is? It's people's heritage. And very often we ask the question, the common man on the street or the common woman on the street, does she care about heritage? Does she really care about all these things, which the old buildings and all that? The answer is not direct. It is only when that piece or that building is missing, he or she will notice it. Oh, where is it gone? I saw something here is missing. So the heritage is something which we live with, we live amongst, but as a common person, we don't notice it until it's gone. And then the memories keep flooding back in and we become emotional. But I feel it's professionals like us architects, conservation architects, historians, and others who have to take up the cudgels on the behalf of the common man. I mean, city is a contested place between different pressures, political, economic, social, so many things. But as professionals in the building industry, and what we are seeing is the heritage of our forefathers or our fraternity, and we know how much effort goes into making a building even today. So it is for us to, I think, take up the issues, and I'm happy that today IA is attempting the first steps in this direction. And actually, my this thing with heritage came in 2008 when the metro was being planned, the metro across the city. So we curated a exhibition called the Metro Impact, again sponsored by IAA and Goethe Zentrum, where we showed the city as it will look after the metro is built. It was just being, planned and being awarded the contract. So we called the metro MD for a discussion, open discussion, and a lot of thing in the press also at that time. And I remember the heritage committee, which Mr. Faiz referred to, called us for a discussion along with the metro MD, asking what exactly is happening, because till then the common man was just seeing some markers on the medians, but really didn't know what was going to come up. Of course, nothing much came of it, because we wanted some kind of an underground line, at least from, line 1 from Ravindra Bharati up to, the MGBS. It didn't happen, but probably the only success I could say is the assembly station, which was proposed right in front of the assembly and right in front of Ravindra Bharati, was shifted slightly towards the Hajj house. So something like a huge gargantuan thing which would have sat on that huge plaza was shifted slightly, and probably that was a success. So it is, I think, efforts like this from professionals like us who can see the big picture, who can see the future, who can have some relation to history. And it's for us to come forward and articulate our views for the common man. And I think it works. It's a tedious task, but I think it is something which we have to do. There is no other way to do it.
Okay, thank you, Shankar. And I would like to thank all my panelists for those opening remarks. Before we proceed for the actual discussion, I would like to request all the audience, people who are watching this panel discussion, if you have any questions, just go ahead, put your questions in the chat box, and we will definitely take it up with the speakers you want the answers from. Now coming back to Vikas and all four of you, I would like to make the floor open and then probably make it more interactive. One of the sense that I'm getting definitely is that when like Faiz was mentioning, even you mentioned that when you go to the Heritage Committee, how do they look at you? How do they interact with you? So if at all we could say that Heritage Committee kind of represents the other side of the table, which is the government or the regulatory body or the local government which administers the city, versus the heritage enthusiast or conservation architects or people who are interested in preserving. Is there a kind of a conflict between the two of them? Is there some kind of a war, or I won't call it a war, but definitely you are on the two opposite side of the table. So why is that dialogue missing at a city level? I mean, I would like to maybe enlarge it larger, and maybe I would like Vikas, because you have worked with in Mumbai with government organizations for so long, that what mechanism should be there or what is missing which makes people get involved with city planning, having a say the kind of city they would like to have? Can the heritage committees be more participative? So in a overall, I would like to hear your views on this aspect, that how do people get involved in taking that call for their own city?
Yeah.
Because
what you raised is a very important question, but you have to understand, Heritage Committee is an advisory committee. It's been given a certain mandate to give advice based on which the municipal commissioner or the urban development department will look into it. As I said to you, what we notice is when we started with the heritage movement way back in 95, we had a large multidisciplinary team of urban designers and things like that. It continued, but of late, a new GR resolution was passed where most of the appointees of the committee became the government representatives. So the professionals who were involved, like an NGO was involved, or the environmental, an environmental NGO or a they were this thing. Earlier, I remember we used to have a journalist on the committee also, and you had some common representatives. So if you have a larger, if the committee is constituted of a mixed bag of people with professionals and with common citizen also who represent, it always works out good. Of late, what became was, it became with head of institutions, whether the engineering college or architecture college, and the professionals were lacking in there. So you have the co-option possibility. So it all depends upon how how the committee is constituted and how much we can interact with the common citizen. Like when you have the World Heritage Day, if you interact with, perhaps on that day you interact with citizens, that will give you feedbacks as this thing. Otherwise, it's just like going to court and you're giving a judgment or you're hearing a case. It doesn't become an interactive thing. But having said that, many times NGOs have also represented and have discussed their points where they felt contradictory, and hearing has been given. So what you really require is a balance of, to hear all the viewpoints. Many a times, I'm just saying, IIA can have a different viewpoint because many architects think that these kind of developments are essential, but at least a debate which will go on. At least for public projects, I think there should be more discussion and kind of a participatory thing. But to manage all these things is very difficult because it's easy said with the limited secretarial staff which they have. It's a difficult task.
So, because before I go to the other panelists, one quick question. So, why is it always that anything which is in that sense good for the city kind of issues are always brought forward by the people to the government rather than government coming forward and saying, okay, this is how we would like to think for you? Any quick thoughts on that? Why is it so? Like, I would like to know from you, festivals like Kala Ghoda, definitely it's a people initiated festival. Did it bring any kind of a change the way people would look at their heritage, that particular precinct, the way they would engage with that part of the city, and how did government finally come on board and either supported it or obstructed it or created troubles for it?
Frankly, government remains neutral and it is not participatory. You don't find any proactive role in conservation from any government, state governments, local government, or things like that. It's more that when there is pressure groups who do things like you cited an example of Kala Ghoda. Kala Ghoda, created that awareness for that, started growing far too bigger, and which is good. And with the money generated, now they are sponsoring some of the projects. I've managed to do 3 projects, out of which 2 were UNESCO Asia Pacific Award winning entries, the fountains of the Mumbai. So things like that. So yes, you can use it productively, but I think there should be more larger, national conferences and participatory debates on special occasions where you can thrash out or you can have, your opinions expressed. That's what I feel.
Okay, thank you. Faiz, sir, I wanted to understand, since, as you said, that you are representing, you actually control and manage a lot of these heritage properties in the city, and your commitment to that is quite remarkable. But I would now be the devil's advocate for you and ask you this question: that why are you doing it? I mean, why would you not just go ahead and use all those nice properties, make them big multi-story glass buildings? Probably you will get more rental or even more real estate value out of it. Why are you even bothered about preserving it?
There are 2 ways of looking at it. The first one would be the properties that I was talking about. They are Hyderabad. They represent Hyderabad. So Hyderabad, it's very difficult to think Hyderabad doing without it. That's number one. At least I feel it that way. And they are beautiful. I tell you, they are beautiful and they are worth protecting it no matter what, commercial, whatever works out to. They are landmarks of Hyderabad. That's one thing. Secondly, well, the other side of it, some of my family properties, personal properties, again, certain palaces. Well, they are beautiful. They are among the finest in the city. But again, the other side of it is what are we doing to benefit the owners of the property? I tell you, what's happened today is by God's grace, our family is comfortable, and therefore, as of now, they aren't thinking about anything. But tomorrow, in Hyderabad, property is like gold today. Even despite pandemic, Hyderabad is booming. Today you're blocking property worth hundreds and thousands of crores, and you have this palace, say about on 5 acres, which is about 1,000+ crore or whatever. So what are the owners benefiting out of it? So instead, we are penalizing the owners for owning this property. So I feel that there has to be something wherein the owners will have to be contributed in some way. Some benefit should pass on to the owner for having that property. They should be rewarded for that. So that is the reason. And there's one question that you had asked about, why are you rebuilding a property, right? The reason being, I personally find it beautiful. As I was just talking about this commercial building and a residential building on Bashir Bagh, Abbots. I mean, just 30 years back, but it looks dirty. It looks terrible. But you look at this Patthar Gatti of Hyderabad, constructed about 100 odd years ago. I mean, it is still beautiful. And apart from that, the locations where we are constructing this, we have those beautiful structures around it, close by. Well, close by could be about 1,000 meters away. But again, that location has those beautiful buildings. And I like it. It looks beautiful. And, it was a guest house that we were building. And what I was talking about was a guest house about 80 years back. So we thought, might as well do that up because there's those little detailings and all that. That's the reason.
So one quick question. So like Mr. Vikas was showcasing in one of his slides, those white buildings and those yellow buildings, where, if you were to consume all that FAR or FSI that is allowed as per law, that's what the shape of the city would become. Imagine, I mean, in Mumbai, they are still talking about an X rate of FAR or FSI. And in our state, in Hyderabad, it's actually free. I mean, there is no limitation, there's no limit to FAR or FSI. In that sense, we have still not reached there, especially in that. So my question would be that, did you ever think of benefiting from the concept of TDR which exists in the state? Where, let's say you have a 5 acre of land which you are not developing, you feel that you are not getting the dues which are rightfully yours. At least you are eligible for that TDR, which you can trade with a developer somewhere in the outskirts of the city, and that way you benefit from the property that you own. So is there any kind of a sense that if you trade that TDR, it's like a one-time deal and you will lose it forever?
That's the fear. That's the fear. So there should be such things. That's what I was talking about. That benefit should be passed on, and you still own the property. It shouldn't be something like an exchange, a barter kind of a thing you give and you lose all rights. So the thing is, I mean, that owner's been protecting that for about 100 years and doing nothing about it, still maintaining that property, which is not easy. And therefore, there are emotional things attached to it. For example, I tell you, on the Begumpet main road opposite the airport, we have our Spanish mosque, which is again a landmark. And I'm sure you look at it, we maintain it pretty all right, except for the terrible wall that was constructed after road widening by the government. We are doing it up again. We'll be doing it up very soon. So the thing is, the reason we got back very active when it comes to the management of the mosque as well is, there was a proposal of having shops right in front of it for the commercial benefit. So we as a family thought it was, I mean, we just can't think about it, that place being hid with, all kind of ugly structures right in front of it. So therefore, I think we have to be sensitive about it. We have to be selfless about it. And there has to be 0% corruption. I tell you, there are bodies who would like to do that and, go in for pagaris and all that, which are whatever. And, so there you got to be a little selfless as well. Yeah.
So I'll come back to you with another question, that what do you teach your children? Okay, so that would be a very interesting way to look at the future. Sajad Bhai, now I was bringing in this whole, one little mention of this festival called Kala Ghoda in Mumbai, how it kind of, motivated certain set of people to think about a particular part of the city in a different way and bring prominence to that. And people did start, caring about that area. So since you have been associated with some of these heritage organizations for long, I would like to maybe again here I will become the devil's advocate. I myself have been part of Intact for long years, but I would still pose this question to you. That do you think that heritage organizations like Intact, AKTC, or some such like Heritage Trust and foundations across the cities in our country, have they failed in some way in galvanizing the kind of public awareness, support, or getting engaged with the policymakers and the government in giving a better shape to the future of the city?
Well, I don't think necessarily Srinivas. You see, we were cribbing all along that people who are in power in the United Andhra Pradesh knew nothing about Hyderabad, knew nothing about Telangana culture. That things would change when our own people would be in power. But unfortunately, the exactly reverse of that has happened. Whatever we had gained in the period when we were so-called oppressed was far greater than what we even can even imagine to or hope to get now. The point is, at least we did get through the heritage rules then. We did get a list, heritage list in place, and in one stroke that was, overruled by the present dispensation. So we are back to square one. When society is always on a firefighting exercise, where is the time to think about something like Kala Ghoda or, in earlier times we did have a festival of our own, the Holy Day. Every year there used to be a grand event in the city when this Muhammad Quli Qutub Shah, the founder's day, was celebrated. Of course, it fizzled out in the late 60s. Was revived by some people interested in the 80s, but again, there were very few takers. The story in Mumbai is different. There you have corporates sponsoring it. There you have, philanthropists, businesses. Hyderabad has not been successful in gaining support from those groups. And unfortunately, that is why I think, and you can say, yes, I think we agree that eventually the blame has to be put on someone. And after all, we who have been trying to do something, we should be willing to stand up and take responsibility that we have failed. But then the point is, again, as Vikas mentioned, that things are changing. With great difficulty, a case was won, Era Manzil demolition was saved, and as part of that, there was this order of the High Court that Regulation 13 stands. Now, no follow-up action has been done on that. Now, we have not asked the government why the Heritage Committee is not being appointed and why, some municipal administration, some IS officer here and there go and start restoring heritage buildings. I was told that extensive use of cement is going on there. So why have we not asked these questions? Because what has come in its place, I don't know how many of her heritage enthusiasts are aware that what Vikas has said for Bombay is now true for Hyderabad. The new Heritage Committee under the Telangana Heritage Act has, I think, 12 serving government officers and 2 nominated representatives who will be co-opted on the, not even nominated, co-opted members. I think even their powers are not defined. So I have not come across any serving officer of the government who will go against the diktats of the government. And we are very, clear about what the present government wants. The present government's intention is to demolish most of our major heritage structures, which are in public ownership, and have, modern buildings in its place. So now, if that Heritage Act comes, and again, in a couple of years, I think you have a new master plan, at which time I think the old master plan, whatever protection the heritages of the building listed heritage, so-called, because I'm not sure whether they're listed, we have been losing a lot of them, and no one is bothered. So what is happening? Regulation 13, if it is in place, then where is the Heritage Committee? Who has given permission even to the MAUD to restore the Charkama? Now, there's no criteria as to who can restore it and what are the, you have people in, we used, at least in the old regime, we used to have a panel of approved conservation architects who are allowed to, be given the responsibility of monitoring the restoration. Now nothing is there. So that is the problem. What is already happened in Mumbai is going to happen here. And of course, with the FSI and all that, it's going to be, I think, even more disastrous in Hyderabad. But the point is, what are we going to do about it? People who are away from their cities for a long time and come back and feel lost. And I have had this feeling time and again of being lost in my own city. तो फैज को भगा दिया था पाकिस्तान से वापस आया तो उसने कहा कि मेरे दिल मेरे मुसाफिर हुआ फिर से हुक्म सादिर के वतर बदर हम तुम दे गली गली सदाए करे रुख नगर नगर का कि सुराख कोई पाए किसी यार नाम अबर का हर एक अजनबी से पूछे जो पता था अपने घर का मेरा हाल यही होने वाला है क्योंकि मेरा जो है and I think Shankar had put it very in more powerful words when he gave that presentation on metro, that we will lose our sense of location in the city. And I've been thinking about that a lot, and I have a lot of times, found myself in situations where I don't know where I am in my city because I've lost the markers. आप हाईटेक सिटी में जाके घूम जाते हैं समझ में नहीं आता कि कहाँ सही है. But Shankar once told me that when this PV Narasimha Rao Expressway was being made, that once you get on top of it and till the time you get off it, you don't know where you are. And if a person doesn't know where he is lost. Not lost physically, but lost mentally. I don't know where I am. And when you lose Usmania Hospital, you lose the sense of where you are, even if you are on the banks of the Musi, because the Musi, as it has been converted into a drain. A sewage drain is that. Murki Nala kehte hain Hyderabad. So these are the things that people of Hyderabad should think about. You are losing your identity markers. You are also losing the markers which give you a sense of your place in your own city. You don't know where you are in your own city. That is going to happen. And I think it's only then, as Shankar said, maybe then people realize what they have lost. But it's our duty to educate them, to tell them that this is going to happen. And this is not age-related. I'm coming close to the age and people begin to lose their senses. But I think I'm still okay. But I've lost that sense because I'm losing markers. And by losing markers, I feel that I am in a place not my city. That is the problem.
Okay, I think that's a very interesting point. I think for you, the new markers in our city are the pillar numbers of the metro and the numerical values of the roads, road number 1 to 10 to 36 to 45. It's very strange. I mean, Vikas would really be kind of, thinking that Bombay is one city where almost every lane is named after some prominent personality, probably who lived in that area or in that lane. But in Hyderabad, it's very interesting to note that your streets are actually numbered and you are known by that. So you are right. I mean, if we are going to have markers like numerical numbers 1 to 10 and pillar numbers as our points of identification of place, we are definitely creating a very strange city, no doubt. But I would now like to come back to the two architects on the panel, Vikas and Shankar. So we have been, both these gentlemen, Faiz and Shadad Bhai, have given us some points to think about, that it's people, it's government. Yes, they have identified certain issues. But what's with us as architects? I mean, would you like to say something, that are we choose out of ignorance or out of a well-intended plan to ignore or not address these kind of concerns while we are around in the city? So Shankar, your point of view, because you have been very active. And then second question, which I definitely want to ask both of you, is this, that is there a difference? I'm sure there is a difference, but what I mean to is that what is the connect between the conservation as a practice and conservation architect as a practicing architect versus the activists who wants to talk about preserving heritage in the city? What kind of a dichotomy is that, or is it a very smooth coexistence, or should they be contradicting each other?
Yeah, Srinivas, see, I can't be as poetic as Sajat. So I'll try how to put this across. I have had my run-ins with the Heritage Committee of the old when it was there. And I totally empathize with Fayaz, the way they looked at it and think, but they did make an attempt. But I have always felt what we lacked, at least Hyderabad or any other urban thing, is a heritage master plan, a proactive heritage master plan. Just like the master plan of land use and so many other things, there should be an inventory of your heritage assets, both private and public. And a listing was made of those 140 assets, by the Huda. But beyond that, there was no kind of a way forward of how to use these assets, how to monetize these assets, how to go forward with these assets. So that is where I feel the Heritage Committee, you may call it committee or a kind of a department or whatever you want to call it, there should be a very strong part in the government or with the municipal corporation. There should be a heritage cell which is proactive, which goes ahead and proposes conservation methods, new users, contemporary users to heritage assets, so that the owners, even the private owner, realizes the value of that asset, rather than looking at it in just monetary terms of, square footage. So here, if you permit me, I've got one slide to show. If you can permit me just 2 minutes.
Yes, please. Yeah, I think also we need to make a note. We are already at 6 o'clock. I think we will extend the session by another 15 minutes. That should be fine. So Shankar, you can go ahead with your slide.
Yeah, just one slide. This is pertaining to Hyderabad, basically. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay. Yeah, you can see it now. Yeah.
Yes.
See,
A blank screen.
A blank screen. Yeah. So most of the Hyderabad, I've taken just example of 4 buildings in the public domain. So if you can see it now.
Yeah, you can
quickly.
You can press that full screen button. No? Just press that full screen thing at the bottom. Yeah.
Yeah. So see, most of our Hyderabad buildings in the public domain are just about 100 years old.
Shankar, just move your cursor. Just move it to the next slide. I think it's gone to the blank side. Yes.
So most of it is about 100 years old. So they are quite robust buildings. They are only surface kind of issues in conservation. So, and many of these can be reused, They are all green buildings in terms of passive energy conservation, today's climate change issues. You can reuse the buildings, so they are quite sustainable. It's only, is an imagination, which is...
Sorry, Shankar, I think you need to press the enter button again. We can't see all the pictures.
No, I'll come one by one.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine.
So this is just what I'm calling the trans-functional use of heritage assets. See, I'm just proposing 4 different things. This can change. This is the Victoria Memorial at Kotapet, which is now used as an orphanage. If you go inside, you feel these small kids, just 3 feet tall, in these huge spaces like, 30 feet ceilings. They are totally lost. So this is an asset which is waiting to be reused. So probably we could have a Telangana Heritage Museum and Cultural Center here, which surprisingly this government has not acted upon even after 7 years to create some kind of an asset like this. The next could be, your State Central Library near Afzalganj. This is also a beautiful building. It is a library. So why not reimagine it as a tea hub for the old city or the South city? Can be made a lively place for youngsters, startups, and other things. Everything is on the western side. So why not on the southern side? Then you have the Erem Manzil in Panjagutta, which Sajad said was saved by the skin of its teeth. But this I have actually written to the Chief Justice of India, Honorable Ramana Garu, that why doesn't he take it up as an international arbitration center, which he has proposed in Hyderabad. This will be a great fit. It's located in a prime area. It's got hotels nearby. It's got a metro connectivity. It's got all the things which need for an international arbitration center. So this is something which we can propose. Then lastly, King Koti Palace, which is a prime area in Abits, near Abits. So this project we had already done some time back into a kind of a retail jewelry mall with an underground shopping in front and all that. So this can be revived. So finally, we put together a quick, list of what is the total square footage roughly of all these 4 buildings, around 635,000 square feet roughly. And surprisingly, the new secretariat which is coming up is also around this same area, around 7 lakh square feet. So if you could have reimagined the secretariat as dispersed in all these buildings, it's one way to look at it. And the cost of the secretariat is around 1,000 crores, which I think this 635,000 square feet to conserve would be around 500 crores at the most, as a conservative estimate. So what I'm getting at is, we have to be proactive and propose to the political class also that these things can be done, and probably it opens an eye that yes, this is possible. So I would like to have a proactive heritage committee which takes on the things. And yesterday, the finance minister talked about monetization of assets on a national scale. I don't know why heritage was left out, because that is one of the prime assets which our country possesses, and it can be beautifully monetized and beautifully conserved. So this is my take on the whole issue. Thank you.
I think, Shankar, you have touched a very sensitive nerve of monetizing heritage buildings under the present regime. Don't even go there. I have my own apprehensions of how they will manage. But coming back to my original question, so I would like to ask Vikas to address this whole idea of Shankar was mentioning that we should be proactive. So this whole dichotomy between being a practicing conservation architect versus being the activist. How do you see that?
Frankly speaking, it's like a conservatory where we try to work projects with individuals who are sponsoring or restoring it. The whole environment is not the conservatory. So unless the government, and I completely agree with what Mr. Faiz said, we needed to renew the leases of all these things. Port area looks good, but actually speaking, the soul has gone out. It was a business district. It is when the headquarters are located in that area, you'll respect that area and that will command that. But now if you shift it and if you have small departmental stores and other things coming in, it's going to add traffic. It's not going to bring that same grandeur as what it used to enjoy. We need to address that. I'm really surprised is that we have smart cities, we have so many other things, but we don't have an experiment with a conservation city. Why don't we give conservation the focus, see the economic benefits, and if it doesn't work, stop it. Let's give it a chance for 5 years to just see how, because heritage economics is something which is completely ignored. And if that is given incentive, and I completely agree, the owners need to be given some kind of an encouragement or some, at least the lease rent and other things. If they continue with the old use and other things, they should give a rebate as compared to the market rents.
So once you were mentioning that the whole soul is moved out of Mumbai, so I wanted to mention this example and seek your opinion on that, because you worked in that area quite large. Is that how the central London works as the prime, the rich of the city live in that historic core, and because the rich live in the historic core, the government is forced to spend maximum amount of money in maintaining roads, streetscape, and everything else around it. So I mean, the costliest place would be something, if I draw a parallel in India, would be to live in the fort area or to live near Charminar, where each of these historic havelis and bodies and things could have been restored, and the wealthiest of the city could live there. Naturally, the municipal corporation will be forced, because you are the people who are paying probably the big tax. You control the government. You could. So why that experiment or that kind of a model did not work in India?
Well, one thing is that I'll come to that question later, but one thing just to say that TDR doesn't work in heritage. So
okay.
In Mumbai at all, there has been just only 4 to 5 examples. We keep it as a kind of a kerosene pill which will solve all kind of fever, but it doesn't solve. No one has taken the TDR for conservation. It doesn't work. And coming to the other question, we have serious issues, because if you're giving metros, which now the city has ample, why aren't we changing our car park policies? Because the very fact, why should you also give, what is disturbing? You all are concerned with landmarks being demolished. We are concerned that the surrounding grain is becoming landmarks. So the landmarks are losing the landmark quality of it. And the density, the infrastructure, and the buildings which are coming, I doubt whether in 20, 30 years, they'll again go for redevelopment perhaps. And that's the concern. And why don't we plow back money to the old buildings and give a rental housing and opportunity which will create affordable housing? We all have been talking about affordable housing, but we've never solved it.
So that's a very interesting point you made, that it's ultimately coming down to quality of construction, whether it's the heritage one or the modern one. And modern one, definitely we are not ready to trust that they will last for 100 years, whereas heritage ones have already proven that they have lasted for more than 100 years. So what are we really talking about? So that's really a good point. So coming back to Shankar, I think I will now go through the last round of questions, and then I would definitely get into, there are 2 questions, 2-3 questions that have come in the chat box. So one of the first questions that comes to my mind is that since of course you have not answered my question about what we as architects, apart from being proactive from a regular practice perspective, should be looking at it. This whole idea about, do you feel threatened? Have you been told by somebody that why are you taking a stand against government? Does that bother you sometime? Has it happened to you?
My mother. She used to be a little apprehensive about things, but it's a stand for the public good. I think that's what we should all look at. In fact, I don't, you had actually tagged me as an activist, but I don't very much like the term. I would like to be called an actionist. Actionist is someone who gives a way forward, proposes a kind of, looks at an issue and gives a way forward of how it can be sorted out or solved. So I think as architects, you're coming back to your question, as architects, I think we have to don that public role, because after all, our creations are public. They are not in some private space. Though it may be for a private individual, all our creations sit in a public sphere. So we have to take that public stance for the good of the public, for the larger common this thing. And I think each architect or each thing as per his or her likes and thing should stand up for the public thing, without becoming a politician. I'm not saying some people may say you get into politics to be public. That's not the case. The thing is to, as a public persona, I think it is, and that is something which I think Vikas will also agree is lacking in our country, of architects talking in the public sphere. It's happening now slowly, and especially the media. Media also should project kind of issues like this in a more forceful manner from the architect's point of view or from the, conservation point of view.
So the next question is, so I'm not, okay, let me name the person. Then there's one question from Ms. Lakshmi Shankar, so this is for you, Vice Chancellor. I would like you to respond to this, is that, so if the conservation process is when it is involved with heritage properties and precincts, if there is a monetary benefit involved, will that work better? That's what you also hinted. So would you like to elaborate on that? In what ways you think the monetary benefit should come to the heritage owners?
Well, there are two ways of looking at this. Certain properties which can sustain on their own, that's how it is. Secondly, private owners, I think that kind of expenditure would be difficult, and therefore government there can be a partnership kind of a thing, wherein, they are funded in some way. It can be repaid, or it can be some kind of an assistance from the state as well for maintaining those properties. So I think that is what is required, and that won't be hardly anything from budget for such a thing, And if you may allow me to, request Shankar Narayan sir to add one more property to the list that he just showed us. American Consulate would probably be moving to their new permanent campus. So we'll have Paiga Palace again, which would be available for some kind of a positive thing, because it's been acquired from us, though the financial settlement is yet to take place. I frankly had given a written a request rather, stating that the Nizam's jewels, which are lying in the RBI locker for how many years, 25, 30 years, may be shifted to Hyderabad, and they can be probably housed over here. When this property can be good enough and safe enough for American Consulate, I'm sure it is good enough for the Nizam's jewels.
That's
so therefore, I would propose it, and I'm sure we all can work in that direction to see that jewels come in, instead of being put in the lockers, in the RBI lockers, maybe, showcase over here in Hyderabad where they belong.
No, that's a nice suggestion.
Yeah, very nice suggestion.
Yeah, you should take it up.
It has a cellar down below. That property is rock solid. It has everything to protect the US consulate, so you can just imagine the quality, frankly. And you have a cellar down below, which can be probably modified for some other use as well. And you have a humongous property which can house the jewelry. It'll be just in one hall, actually. And you can have a museum, a jewelry museum or something, a presentation, a picture gallery all around the place. It's a mammoth place, 65,000 square feet. On 4.5 acres of land.
That's a lovely suggestion. Srinivas, I would just one point.
No, 1 minute, Shankar. I just, before I go on to you, I'd like to ask Sajad my last question. So are we far too less in numbers, Sajad bhai, in this city, or for that matter in every city, who are concerned about heritage and its protection and wanting to do something about it? And taking cue from what Shankar was saying, that being an actionist more than an activist, and also you talked about the Heritage Conservation Committee. I'm proposing that why can't there be a public heritage committee? Why does it have to come from the government? So are we far too less in number in every city so that we are not able to do that? So I would like both Sajad and Vikas to respond. So first, Sajad.
Well, I've been talking.
I think Sajad, I request you to switch off your video because your bandwidth is too low.
Heritage Committee for a long time now. I've been talking about a Heritage Committee, not necessarily constituted by the government, but by the people of Hyderabad. Coming. Once you have the Heritage Act, heritages of the city, then I think two co-opted members are not going to be able to counter the proposals of the government, which is very clear to erase all our heritage markers. So we should be, and I think we will have to constitute a committee of our own, like a shadow government or something. It has to be there, and I think we have enough support from the media. The media has never let us down till now, at least, and I don't think they will in this endeavor if we go about it in the right manner. And we will have their support. It might not have an impact on the government as we would like it to have, but that's a different matter. At least we would have tried. I theory that perspective of the result, thoughts of giving up on heritage and just sitting back and relaxing, but that is not possible. Kya kahenge, marker of my identity stands. So that is what I will do. That is what I have to do for Hyderabad. Again, we're Shankar शायरी कर रहे हैं मगर वो शायरी लेता हूं
Sajad bhai, before you go ahead with your shairi, can I request you to turn off your video so that we can hear you better? I think your bandwidth is low, so turn your video off and then with your shairi, please.
तो वो एक साहब ने बहुत अच्छी बात कही थी एक जमाने में कि नौखा है मेरे माजी के खंडर बस्ती में, a few pillars standing from a top of which my past asks at me रहेगा जब तक और
Sorry Sajad bhai, I think
बनी है काफी दिन से बात हो रही है, and it goes far beyond just built heritage, of course. Natural heritage is also threatened. Support from very heritage activists and activists for protection of lakes. She recommended we constitute a committee of our own, and now you are the second person who is very forcefully put it.
I think Sajad sir, we will have to have an in-person session with you separately for we couldn't hear the whole shairi completely, but because very quickly you wanted to make a point.
Yeah, actually what we can do, which doesn't involve government, is to form friends of friends of heritage. Simple thing is like how you have Victorian society or a Georgian society and things like that. So like we have now a very active Art Deco movement, Art Deco group in Mumbai, which is doing a lot of awareness in this thing. So when we build that awareness and, if decisions are not going in favor of right proper conservation, then these kind of groups can come forward and we can get the right kind of judgment as what is required in the other manner if things don't happen in the other way.
Yeah, so I think what you mean is more action is really needed from our side. So I think this really complements a point which Mr. Suryanarayan Murthy, who is another conservation architect based out of Hyderabad, he's making his point in the chat saying that acting heritage cell is what really matters, not the so-called for the sake of formality that you create heritage committees and rules and regulations. So with that point, I would like to now go to all of you. One quick one-liners from all of you, that what would you like to do for your city in the next 1 month? It could be a very small thing, but are you willing to do something for your city in this context? So Vikas, why don't you say something? In 1 month, what would you do?
Well, just look after and maintain your heritage properties. That's the first thing, because if you don't look after, then the whole decay starts. So basic tenets.
Hi, sir. You're muted.
Yes, what I would like to take up is, we have this beautiful river passing beside the Hyderabad public school called River Kallaveri, which is also called Nala today, unfortunately, because of the drains. I'd like to take up removal of plastic from the riverbed if it is possible. I'll take
Very
it.
good.
Thank you.
Shankar.
Yeah, 1 month is too short a time for a 100-year-old heritage, but I would like to write and I would like to project the future. I think the next generation of E generation is going to respect and use heritage much more than us, because they are a free generation and they are a rental generation. They don't want to own things. They just want to use things. So I think the new city is going to be the old city, where all these things will come back again and have better value for the next generation. I'll write about it.
So let me do this typical, media journalist act for you. I give you 30 more seconds. Why don't you say something to the students of architecture of this city?
Students of architecture, make
Yeah.
an inventory.
Where do you think we are missing the link? Don't you think we are missing the link there?
Yeah, make an inventory and propose things, new usages. See, all these buildings are, after all, beautiful shells. You can put in anything. That's the new economy. So you just propose things and make it public. Be public. Speak your mind.
Thank you. Thank you. Sajad bhai, with you, we will close this session.
Can I come in for a minute before we just...
Yes, please. Okay, please.
There's one more thing that we require. When Mr. Pallam Raju, my senior in school, honorable minister, former minister, was in office, HRD minister. So at that point of time, I had requested him that it'll be lovely if we can have civic sense and some kind of such thing as in our curriculum, a mandatory requirement in our curriculum. So once that comes into our curriculum, 10 years down the road, you're going to see results, because it's going to be the students that are going to point fingers and try to, be better citizens. That is something which I'm looking at. The reason being, today, if you look at this heritage, eyesores beside the heritage buildings, what they do is they build something and, the rear side is not even plastered. That is only because you care a damn about it. You've done your job. Rear side is the heritage building. You are touching the wall of the heritage building. You don't even plaster it. So it looks, that is something that'll happen when we have civic sense and we try to see to it that what we do has to be pleasant and nice for others as well. Thank you.
Sajad bhai.
एक महीने में. Well, things to change, and towards that, all Hyderabadis have to do is fight it out. And if by chance I'm beaten up and need medical assistance, I hope I'm put in the heritage block of Osmania Hospital.
Let's pray that nothing of that sort happens to you. Nonetheless, we would like you to visit the heritage buildings of the city and heritage block of the hospital as well, but not for the reason you mentioned. So let us all pray that at least all of us in Hyderabad, including all our distinguished members of Indian Institute of Architects, join us and at least resolve that we will try and strive to work for preserving and protecting the heritage of our city. We could start with little documentation. We could start our own blogs. We could start on Instagram. These are all individual efforts with our voices can be heard by the so-called decision makers or policy makers. I would now like to invite our chairman, Indian Institute of Architects. Uday, you want to say something? I know you have been listening to all of us very quietly and smiling once in a while. So I'm sure you have something to say. And then I would request if Aditya, our joint secretary, is here, then I would like him to.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing. I think there are a couple of things, just observations on a lighter vein. The metro was lost us from where we are. Apart from that, one thing I thought it has benefited us is by the pillar numbers, you can identify where you are. That's what I thought it is. But then on a serious note, Shankar, You were talking about identifying the structures. See, like one thing came into my mind is that the government or any policymakers, unless if you have a program for listed out for the entire future, all the listing being done. If you don't do, what is happening is most of the so-called heritage building, they wait till it actually becomes a very decayed and deteriorated building, and then they try and put up an argument that it can't be renovated nor sort of improved or any such thing. And that convinces most of the people who sort of, as a commoners, so they tend to sort of believe that kind of an argument saying that, yeah, this is too old and this is too ugly to be reused. So therefore, they would prefer a newer, a building, a newer environment. So like you rightly said, had Osmania Hospital been 10 years back or earlier, if that had come to a discussion about, having to have a newer building or some such thing, then probably it would have been in a better shape for having already got renovated. Same goes with the story of the Eramanzil also. I mean, why wait till such a point that it almost gets ruined and then you talk about renovation or conservation? So, like you rightly said, I think we should work towards having a list of the things and having a for the entire kind of a policy as to how you should actually identify these buildings much earlier before they actually get decayed. They're totally gone out of. Anyway, thank you. It was a very
thank you.
Nice, extremely well curated event. Thank you very much, Justin.
Yeah, thank you, Uday sir. I just have got one suggestion.
Sajat wanted to say something. He raised his hand.
Okay, I'll just come back to that. So I'm just reading out one suggestion which has come from Dr. Muhammad Iqbal Javed, where he's suggesting that there should be a strong public heritage committee. So I would request Dr. Muhammad Iqbal, why don't you just speak few words? I would request you can unmute yourself. I don't know if the program controller can allow him to speak very quickly.
I'm not able to.
Yeah, we can hear you, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. What I have been noting down all these years in the conservation of the Osmania General Hospital and the old city, there is no public support. Public has been kept away from these things. Public is being misinformed. So we need a strong committee, public committee, which can give the correct information and have a liaison between the government and the local politicians. So all these people, there's a liaison between the politicians and the government, and they are misinforming the public, and public is becoming helpless and afraid to come forward for the preservation of the heritage. This is the real problem which is coming in between. Our bridges are being made as markets. Most of the things, the old city is not an old city, it's an original city with 16 heritage places, and the 5 kilometers of metro which can connect these 16 places has been stopped because of political consensus not there. So this is the thing. So we need to have a strong public committee which can bring the politicians and the local politicians as well as the regional politicians as well as the government together on some positive note. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Iqbal. I think that's a very valid point you made, and I think that also brings in the live voice into our session today. Thank you so much for being there. I've noticed that you've been there since the beginning, and so I would like to take this opportunity to invite Aditya or Asha. I can see Asha here. Aditya, are you here?
Yes, Srinivas Garu, yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you so much. Oh, bright and happy looking Aditya. So Aditya is our Joint Secretary of the Indian Institute of Architects Telangana chapter. So welcome Aditya, and over to you.
Thank you. I have nothing much to add except but do my pleasant duty of thanking everyone here. I must say it was a very long session, but much needed session. We've been thinking about heritage for a very long time, both all in our private conversations and also in many public forums. And I think we've got this opportunity to host this wonderful, very stimulating session. And I must thank Srinivas Murthy Garu to initiate this conversation and also moderate this session. But more important,
No, you have to.
to have agreed to be
Aditya?
part of this session.
Sorry, you got muted in between.
Is it okay? Am I audible?
Yes, please.
So yeah, thank you, Mr. Faiz, Mr. Sajjadji, Mr. Vikas, and of course our own dear member of IIA, Architect Shankar, for sparing your time and contributing to this session. A lot of ideas have been floated, and a lot of comments have been offered by all the audience. And I hope we don't see this as some kind of a theoretical session, but do something collectively to take it forward in some capacity. And we are eager to have all our panelists once again, if we intend to discuss this further and take it to some kind of a logical conclusion. Thank you all for attending this session. And I wish that IIA Telangana chapter will continue to steer such great conversations with the support of all our members. Thank you very much, one and all.
Yeah, before we log off, I would request all of you to just switch on your cameras for a minute so I can probably try and take a picture of this virtual conference. Yes, few more. Okay, so that looks like a good picture. Thank you so much. Keep looking at your camera. So I have a picture ready for all of you.
Got it?
Yes, I think I'm good. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vikas, for
Thank
being
you.
with
Thank
us.
you, Vikas.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vikas. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Sajjadji. Bye-bye.
Bye.